You got me.
All right, welcome to week 2, lesson 2 of the Abide part 2, right? We're in 2nd John now instead of 1st John. So I did want to go ahead and just briefly remind us what we learned in week 1 before we go into week 2. So we set up a lot of the correct perspective for the book of 1st John. So we said that this was written by John the Elder, and why did he introduce himself as the elder is because he is going to pastor them. He's going to shepherd them. It's reminding them of that his motivation for them is love and respect and guiding them to the truth. Okay. And then he used that beautiful description of the church as the elect lady, those who are secure in their salvation and that they have his respect and his love. Okay, so we'll go ahead and pray, and then we will start into today's verses. Dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this little letter of 2nd John. And I pray as we get into the meat of the text, the main things of this text, that we would focus on you. Lord, John gives us strong warnings today. I pray that we take heed of those warnings and that we apply them to our lives so that we can be wise and we can be faithful in guarding the truth and guarding our love for you and for each other. It's in your name we pray. Amen. All right, so before we jump into the main passage, I challenged you all last week to find how many truths were in the books of 2nd John and 3rd John, and how many times the word love was in 2nd John and 3rd John. So Valerie, I'm going to put you on the spot. Just hold up the fingers. How many times did you find truth in those? You remember? It's okay. I put you on the spot. I wanted to see if our numbers matched. 2nd John.
I did not.
Okay, that's fun. I'll check with the in-person ladies when they join. But I found that both in 1st or 2nd John and 3rd John, that I found the word truth 7 times in both. So I'm not a huge person that always is looking for numbers, but I thought it's pretty cool that John's main themes here are going to be truth and love. So I found it 7 times, both in 2nd John and 3rd John. And then I found the word love or be loved 4 times in both 2nd and 3rd John. So I just thought, like, even if there's maybe 1 or 2 I missed here or there, that we see that he's setting up these letters very similarly, that in both instances, he's reminding these believers, this congregation in 2nd John, and then Gaius in 3rd John, that the main points of Christianity, which we learn in 1st John, is truth and love, to stay rooted in those things. So I put down a couple of verses for us to review. So we looked at this verse last week too. It's John 14:6. Jesus said to him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And then also 1 John 4:8. Anyone who does not love does not know God, because God is love. So as we're reading through these texts today and we hear these words, truth and love, repeated to us, let's keep in mind that truth and love are just not hypothetical thoughts or expressions or emotions that we have as people, but they are the person of God. Okay, that especially we know the Father and we know the Spirit because the Father sent the Son to show us what he is like, and he is truth and love. So there's some fill in the blanks about truth. The definition just from Webster of what truth is: the body of real things and facts, actuality. Okay, so a lot of times in culture, the culture we're living in right now is pushing that, well, truth is relative. And it's just not true, right? That is a falsehood. There is realness. There are facts. There is an actuality. And what God says is true because he is truth. Nothing was before him. He created all things for his glory and purpose. So we remember that he is the truth. Next, we see the definition of love: strong affection for another out of kinship or personal ties. Okay, strong affection for. Okay, so we don't have a God that just rules and reigns, right? But we have a God who is this affection, especially towards his children, okay? That we've been brought in through our adoption to be a part of the family. So we remember that when someone rejects truth or love, that it's also a rejection of that person, the person of God, especially the person of Jesus. So I think Ephesians 4:14 through 16 does a beautiful job of describing what I'm trying to describe here. Paul is pretty good at describing these things, so we'll trust him here in Ephesians. So that we may no longer be children tossed to and fro by the waves and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by human cunning, by craftiness in deceitful schemes. Rather, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way into him who is the head, into Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and held together by every joint with which it is equipped, when each part is working properly, makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love. So I just love this because we're going to talk today. What's coming in? These false prophets are coming in and they're trying to separate the children. They're trying to deceive the children from the truth, who is Christ, right? They're trying to make waves, make chaos through human cunningness, craftiness, and deceitful schemes. Okay, and they're trying to separate them from that security in the love within the family, which John's been talking about, but also from the love of God. So why do that? Well, insecure people, right, are easily manipulated. Remember in our study about eldership, we said that the elders are not out for personal gain, but we're going to see something way different with these false prophets. So let's go into verses 4 through 6. It says, walking in the truth and love is our title. I rejoice greatly to find some of your children walking in the truth, just as we were commanded by the Father. And now I ask you, dear lady, not as though I were writing to you a new command, but the one we have had from the beginning, that we love one another. And this is love, that we walk according to his commandments. This is the commandment, just as you have heard from the beginning, so that you should walk in it. Okay, so we're going to pause here, even though he doesn't pause, just to break this down. So what causes John to rejoice? We see that the children walking in the truth. So obedience. So I'm going to pull out this graph a little bit. Okay, so this is that review, right? That this walking in obedience is significant in our joy. Okay, so we have love and truth are what protects this fellowship with the Lord and fellowship with each other. Okay, and so John is saying, like, hey, when the children are doing this, right, when they're living in truth, this is something to rejoice over. This makes me happy. Now, are all the children walking in truth? No. Some of the children are walking in the truth. So here he's prepping for what he's going to be talking about, right? Some are following, but some are being pulled away. Now, are they still children? Yes. And that's going to be significant when we look at some of these verses coming up. They are still children. He is calling them back into obedience. All right, so why? Why does he rejoice in this? So if we look at verse 4, I rejoice greatly to find some of your children walking in the truth, just as we were commanded by the Father. So this makes John very happy. It makes him rejoice because they're being obedient to not his commands. Remember, it's not because of his building himself up or building his own power up, but because it's glorifying to God, because God, the Father, has commanded it. Okay, so that's why it's a joyful thing for him. So I wanted us to look because we got some weird punctuation going on, don't we? In verse 5. So we see right after lady, we have that long pause. And then after the beginning, we have another pretty long pause. So it looks like and feels like almost that John is stalling or pausing on purpose for emphasis. So look right at before that first pause. And now I ask you, dear lady. Okay, so he's getting ready to ask her something, but he wants to reaffirm first how he feels to her, right? Dear, he's conveying that affection towards her. I'm telling you this because you are precious to me. That's why I'm speaking truth. So he's reinforcing with that pause that this is done out of love. Okay. So we see once again proper ways for shepherds to pastor, right? He's being gentle here. He's not coming with them and just socking them. He's coming to them in this humble stature. And that is those are great attributes to have in our leaders, okay? We want humble, gentle leadership, okay? So we want that in the church, and we also want that in our homes, right? It's a good reminder as parents. Does my parenting reflect Christ, how he shepherded, okay? So let's move on though to reread verses 5-6 here, because we get a little bit repetitive. Okay, so, and now I ask you, dear lady, not as though I were writing you a new commandment, but the one we have heard from the beginning, that we love one another. And this is love, that we walk according to his commandments. And this is the commandment, just as you have heard from the beginning, so that you should walk in them. Okay, so basically he is repeating this same theme a couple of different ways, but a lot in 2 verses. So the things that are standing out to me is that he's talking about obedience, right, with these commandments, but also that they are from the beginning. They're not new. Okay, so let's go through this a little bit. So what commandments is he speaking of? And I think I wrote down Matthew 5:17 for you here. It says, do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. So those commandments are the ones we see in scripture. Now, when we get back to Exodus, we're going to go through the law. There's a lot there. And no, we don't, especially the ceremonial laws, we don't follow them anymore. Why? It's because a lot of them were meant to help the people of Israel who did not have Christ in the flesh to understand the things that Christ was going to do. So now, instead of doing these ceremonies, we're instructed to reflect and look upon the works of Christ, the better example than what they had in the Old Testament. But especially those big 10, like we're called to keep those, right? We don't need to be murdering and lying and cheating and stealing. Like, no, he didn't come to abolish those things. So it's a loving thing to keep those commandments. Jesus came to fulfill them, right? We could never do it perfectly. So he did it for us. He fulfilled those for us. But living in obedience is a good and godly loving thing. And then we have Jesus's words in John 13, 34 and 35, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another, right? So the emphasis is, before we just had that list of rules to do. Okay. But Jesus just didn't want us to, he has a better way. The new covenant, the focus is, yes, we do these things, but we do them out of love motivation. So I want to talk about that a little bit. So it's a paradigm shift here from just doing what is right to being what is right, right? God is love. And so we're being transformed into that as well through obedience. So he's calling us to love one another. So a commandment, because we see commandment, and a lot of times when we think of commandments, we think of harshness or sternness, but commandment, the definition was the act of power of commanding. Okay, so then I went ahead and was like, okay, anytime the word is in the definition, I want further explanation. So then I went to commanding, and it says drawing attention or priority. So think about this. What is he telling us? So a commandment is out of power. God has authority to command things. So we do submit to his authority, right? But why is he commanding? It's to draw our attention to what our priorities should be. And John has done a great job in 1 John and is reminding us, especially in that intro, right? And throughout this, what are our priorities as Christians? Love and obey, love and truth, right? Like that song, it says, trust and obey, right? Same thing, trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus. Okay, so that is our priority. We trust and obey our Father because we believe he is love. And we're called to be motivated by love as well. So let's jump back into verse 6 to break this down even further. And this is love, that we walk according to his commandments. This is the commandment, just as you have heard from the beginning, so that you should walk in them. So how to love? Through that trust, through walking in his obedience, right? Going to pull that out, right? That was right at the bottom here. Walking in the light, having that fellowship with the Lord is through that obedience. But that obedience, right? We're not going to have that obedience unless we have that love. So you can't separate the two. Okay. So this reminded me that obedience divorced from love is legalism. And legalism is very dangerous. So Matthew 23 verses 24 through 26. You blind guides, straining out a gnat and swallowing a camel. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you clean the outside of the cup and the plate, but inside they are full of greed and selfish indulgence. You blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and the plate, that the outside also may be clean. So what was Christ talking about? The Pharisees were very good at looking the part, but they didn't have love for the people. In fact, they kept burdening and shaming the people. And what Christ is saying is, no, this is not godliness. Godliness starts with the motivation of love in your heart. Okay. Verses 7 through 9. For many deceivers have gone out into the world, those who do not confess the coming of Jesus Christ in the flesh. Such a one is the deceiver and the Antichrist. Watch yourselves, so that you may not lose what we have worked for, but may win a full reward. Everyone who goes on ahead and does not abide in the teachings of Christ does not have God. Whoever abides in the teaching has both the Father and the Son. All right, so we see here he's warning us right away about the deceivers, right? The Antichrist. So I went ahead and looked up deceiver. It says to cause to accept as true or valid what is false or invalid. So we said that God is truth. So here these deceivers are coming in and they're selling something that is false as true. So if God is truth, if Jesus is truth, they're selling something wrong about him and about truth. So I also saw it in the definition of deceiver is here's their motivation. Someone who ensnares. So this is someone actively trying to trap people through lying, through twisting the truth. So how many does he warn us about? Many. Okay. So many deceivers. So are we aware of that? I know a lot of times, especially in Christian circles, we hear the Antichrist and we just think about the big Antichrist at the end. But John is warning them, there are many in the world. Be on guard. This is still true to us today. Don't just listen to anyone that has a platform who claims to love Christ and preach Christ. It's not true. Like a lot of times, it makes me sick. Okay. Or when you hear people's stories where they come from churches that were really harmful and hurtful. Yes, many who claim to be followers are deceivers, and their goal is to ensnare people and hurt them. Mm-hmm. You have to be careful. Look at what their core beliefs are before you start a study over someone. I'll be honest, just because they're on the Lifeway doesn't mean they're safe. Doesn't mean they're safe. And quite honestly, just because they're on K-Love doesn't mean they're safe either, as far as music ministers. Look at what they are teaching, preaching. Is it contrary to the truth? Are we checking as we are listening our own knowledge of the scriptures? If something seems odd, we get those heart checks from the Spirit. Are we going back and looking at the word? Is this true? So Jesus, I'm not going to go there, but Jesus gives this beautiful example of these bridesmaids that are waiting. And it says 5 of them let their candles burn out and they don't get in. So that's a pretty eye-opening number, that 50% of those claiming to be followers of Christ were not. To be aware, even in our own friendships. Like if I have a friend that starts giving me advice that is not from the Lord, am I aware of that? Do I speak truth to that because that's loving? Or do I just listen to some of those things because they're what my flesh wants to do? Okay, be aware. Okay, so John goes through a list, though, of how you can detect these deceivers. So let's refresh our brains on the actual verses. So, for many deceivers have gone out into the world, those who do not confess the coming of Jesus Christ in the flesh. Such a one is a deceiver and the Antichrist. That's our one. They do not confess Jesus Christ in the flesh. So a lot of these false preachers were denying that Jesus was human. Okay, that he was not the Son of Man. So they only believed part of what was the truth. They were selling a false gospel because they're saying, well, Jesus wasn't this or that. Okay. So we need to test the doctrine of the people that we're putting ourselves into submission to as far as teachers. Are they taking things out of context? Are they shaping Jesus into their own wishes and likeness? Okay, these specific teachers didn't want to believe that Jesus was human because it let them manipulate people in certain ways. They were teaching that anything physical was sinful. Okay, so they were teaching a false doctrine in that way. So to keep in mind the whole person of the truth. And if people are teaching something different than that, then we need to keep ourselves safe. The second, let's go on. Watch yourself so that you may not lose what we have worked for, but may win a full reward. Everyone who goes on ahead and does not abide in the teaching of Christ does not have God. Whoever abides in teaching has both the Father and the Son. So are they abiding in that truth? Personally, are they living according to the teachings? Okay. And we talked about that, like the tests of the elder is a good test for these false teachers. Are they out for selfish gain? Are they greedy in the areas of power, sex, or money are the big ones? Or are they walking in the same manner that we are all called to walk through? So what is their motivation, right? That's the motivation test. Is their motivation love like John's is? Or is their motivation self? Okay. So, what does John warn them of losing? Okay, and this is where some people get tripped up a little bit, and that's why I asked you to pay attention to that first part in chapter 4, in verse 4. We're coming back to that. It says the full reward. Okay, so what is the full reward? Okay, this is not speaking of people's salvation. Okay, if you have trusted Jesus Christ as Lord in your heart, nobody can take you from him. Now, they can steal a lot of things from you, though. So what can they take from us, right? If they have convinced us that we need to do certain things that are not godly, right? What's going to happen to that wheel, right? They've convinced us not to love family, or that there's that holding to the faith, holding to the truth of who Jesus is. They're causing us to fall out of joy. They're robbing us of our peace. Okay, so what they're doing is they're trying to manipulate us, ensnare us to working for them and their kingdom, for whatever their lust is, instead of working for Jesus, for the kingdom, who builds us up in love and truth. Okay, so we call that sanctification, right? They're trying to take our eyes off how Jesus wants to grow us in godliness and focus on a couple of things that are not pleasing to the Lord. So I've listed some common traps of false teachers here. So the first one, they want people to focus on works. And oftentimes we call this a prosperity gospel. Okay. You've got to earn the Father's love instead of accepting it as a free gift to us. Okay. Like, oh, well, if you've gotten sick, that's because you haven't prayed hard enough. You haven't prayed the right way. Okay. That's an evil thing. Okay. Like, is there any security in that? No. And a lot of these cult leaders and false prophets, that's what they want. Yeah, work. You got to work for my organization for free, and you got to take all this abuse for the better good. And that's not godly. God says, be still and rest in my love for you. The second trap that I wanted us to be aware of is that they want you to live a life of condemnation and shame, constantly breaking you down, never building people up. And this was a big thing with these false Gnostic teachers at the time, because they claimed that because Christ didn't have a body, that your body was sinful and you needed to punish yourselves. And some sects of different cults that claimed to love Christ, they would actually have people whip themselves to somehow get forgiveness of sin. You know, I've seen extremes where people do like mock crucifixions where they don't let the people die, but they say that in order to be forgiven of your sin, you need to do all this harmful things. And that is not godly. It's not because of your works. There's no further punishment needed. Jesus took all the wrath of God on himself on the cross so that me and you did not have to. So contrary to what these false prophets want us to live like, here's what God says he wants us to live like in Galatians 5:1. For freedom, Christ has set you free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit again to the yoke of slavery. So what is that yoke of slavery? It's sin. Okay? He wants us to live in the love and truth. And there's great freedom there, that we get to give out of a joyful heart, not because we have to earn anything. All right. This is 2 John 10:11. If anyone comes to you and does not bring this teaching, do not receive him into your house or give him any greeting, for whoever greets him takes part in his wicked works. All right. So who is John specifically talking about here? Because this gets tricky. Okay, so I want us to pay attention to some words. Okay, if anyone comes to you and does not bring this teaching. So this is specific, very specific warning about traveling pastors or traveling false prophets. Okay, so this has sometimes been distorted as like, well, if someone's not a believer, you can't have them over for dinner. No, okay, Jesus ate with sinners. If you want to further study a little bit of this, you could go to, I think I wrote it down, 1 Corinthians 5:9-13. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but Paul breaks that down and basically says, if you had no part with liars, deceivers, thieves, then you couldn't live in this world, basically, because you are in this world, you are going to have relationships with such people. Okay, so that's not talking about like, hey, like if somebody's an atheist or a Buddhist, you can't talk to them. Don't even shake their hand. Like that's not what that means. Okay. But this is putting emphasis on that there's these traveling teachers that are claiming to love the Lord who don't. And at this time, they're not going to go stay at a hotel room. They want to stay with you. So what this is saying is this would be an endorsement of their ministry. Okay? Do not support ungodly ministries. Don't give money to it. Don't host them in their house. You know, I don't usually have a lot of pastors asking me to stay in their house, so it really hasn't come up that much. But I'm not gonna click like on their posts on Facebook. Not gonna follow them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm not going to endorse them. Okay, So, where am I? Okay, so we do not support evil ministries, especially those that claim a false Christ. Okay, but we do reach out to sinners, right? It says, how can they believe if they've never heard? How can they never hear if we don't talk to them, right? We're to be salt and light in a dying world. Okay, so we're not called to judge the world. That's God's job, right? But we're not going to enable sin either. All right. Oh, I think your fill in the blank is do not participate or endorse sin. Look at this. We're at the final greeting. 2 John, so short and tiny. All right, verse 12. Though I have much to write to you, I'd rather not use paper and ink. Instead, I hope to come to you and talk face to face so that our joy may be complete. The children of your elect sister greet you. So, how does John prefer to pastor? Face to face, right? He would not prefer to send an email or a text message, right? But he had to write a letter because this was urgent and he couldn't get there as fast, right? What does he confess in this closing then? Though I have much more to write you. So this is not the only problem they got going on, but he is just laying out the biggie for them. What you need to know right now, the rest we'll have a conversation about. I will listen to you. You will listen to me. There will be dialogue. The Lord asks us to be quick to listen, slow to speak. So there's wisdom in that. So John has gotten some things from maybe letters from people concerned at this church and has responded to it. He's got some kind of correspondence that this needed to be addressed, but his desire is to meet with them face to face. I wanted to think about what are some things that we miss out on in the experience when we don't talk to face, when we are doing, text messaging or emailing or even writing those letters, which I love a good letter. I love to see somebody's pen on paper. We don't see that very much anymore because it takes time and effort, right? But think about that. What do we lose? We lose eye contact.
Tone of voice.
Yeah. With a lot of kindness goes out because you can't read tone, right? Tone or expression. Like if you can't see me tearing up because this is hard to tell you, you might not know how much love is behind this truth that I'm telling you, right? Inflection or pace. We could see that John was trying to show that a little bit in verse 4, right? With those long pauses. Okay, but those are hard things to convey, that I'm not just spouting this off really quickly, that this is deeply concerning, that I'm going to take time to word this specifically, to do this as gently as possible. It's much easier to see face to face, right? Also, physical contact. When something's hard, a lot of time reach out and take that hand, right? Especially in times of mourning or deep loss, we are made to be physical beings. Being together physically is important. That's part of the reason why COVID was so hard, right? It separated us. And John is saying here, what is it? It's his desire to make his joy complete, to have fellowship together. So all of those things, if we can, meeting face to face, especially when confronting sin, is best. Okay? It brings more joy. I feel like it brings greater healing because there's a time of community within the meeting as well. So then we hear the ending, right? And it seems kind of short and abrupt. Verse 13, the children of your elect sister greet you. So what is he sending? That love of the family, right? It's not just me. All your brothers and sisters here, all the children here, They're for you. They're greeting you. Okay. So he wants to end on an emphasis of familial love. All right. Well, 2 John. Now we'll go to 3 John. So I was more specific with my study notes for this week. So I want us, we'll probably just go through perspective and verses 1 through 4, but I want us to start studying the whole chapter, which is only one, right? The whole book of 2 John, because I think we can dig in a little bit deeper, or 3 John, my bad. We already finished 2 John. So the first thing is just read and pray through 3 John. The second thing is I want you to attempt to set up perspective on your own. So this is where a good study Bible is helpful. So if you don't have a good study Bible, I would recommend getting it. I really like my ESV study Bible, but there's lots of very good study Bibles out there. So when you're setting up perspective, I've listed some things I want you to look for. So who is John writing to? What is he writing about? So just vaguely, what is he writing about? C, when does this occur? And he's not going to list the time. So that's once again where a good study Bible comes in. D, why? So not just what is he talking about, but why is he writing this? What is his motivation? E, what are his main themes? Well, hopefully you know 2 of them because we talked about them today, right? Those repetitive words. And so you know that love and truth are repeated, but are any other concepts or words repeated in 3 John? Okay. Then to get into your study portion, I want you to try to make that list of everything you can discover about God and his expectations for believers. I think you will find that really rewarding when you do that. The 4th thing is to pick your meditation verse for the week. And then I want you to try copying it out word for word. But after then, I want you to try to put it into your own words, because it really challenges you to think about the meaning of each word. And if you want to make it even more challenging, try not to use any of the same words at all using the verse. I mean, you're going to have to use is, a, the, those kind of words. But anytime you could pick a synonym, try to do that. And I think that will really challenge you all and make you think. Remember, we said meditation is to ponder, think through what the meaning of that verse. And then, of course, pray through it as well. 5, chase a lead. All right, so last week I challenged you to chase a lead that had both love and truth. So where did I do that last week? I did that with that Ephesians verse, and that was so great because I feel like, Ephesians 4:14 through 6 had both love and truth, and then it was just wonderful because it wrapped everything up that I was thinking and feeling about what John was trying to teach us about the importance of love and truth. It's a great little summary of what I was trying to articulate already. So instead of looking for love and truth, I want you to find one passage about doing good and a passage about not. Oh, I didn't put not on your notes. Make sure you put not imitating evil. We don't want to imitate evil, okay? So not imitating evil. And then I want you to take a time of reflection and see how these help you to understand what John's saying in 3 John. I'm putting you to work this week. All right, thanks. I'm going to stop the recording now. Bye.